Imagine a young man lying in bed at 2 a.m. His phone is in his hand. He watches videos of successful people, millionaires, entrepreneurs, athletes, creators. He imagines himself standing on a stage, living the life he's always wanted. For a moment, he feels unstoppable. Tomorrow he'll change everything. Tomorrow he'll wake up early. Tomorrow he'll finally start. But morning comes. The alarm rings. He hits snooze. 5 more minutes become another hour. The dream stays alive, but the action never begins. Sound familiar? Millions of people live this exact story every single day. They're called lazy. But what if they're not? What if laziness isn't the real problem? What if underneath that lack of action lives one of the most misunderstood psychological battles of all? The war between dreams and action. Have you ever gone to bed feeling inspired, certain that tomorrow would be different? You promised yourself, tomorrow I'll finally start. But when tomorrow arrived, nothing changed. Imagine a young man with a notebook full of brilliant ideas. Every page is filled with dreams, a business he wants to build, a book he wants to write, a life he desperately wants to live. Every night he imagines what success will feel like. But every morning, he closes the notebook and tells himself, I'll start when I'm ready. Days turn into weeks. Weeks become years. The dream never dies, but neither does the waiting. This is the silent war between dreams and action. One part of the mind is filled with ambition. The other is trapped by hesitation. Psychology tells us that the bigger the dream, the more intimidating the first step can feel. Because once you take action, your dream is no longer protected by imagination. It becomes vulnerable to failure. And sometimes people don't stay stuck because they lack ambition. They stay stuck because their dreams mean so much that they're terrified of watching them fall apart. The greatest battle isn't between success and failure. It's between the person you dream of becoming and the fear that keeps telling you to wait one more day. The fear nobody calls laziness. What if the person you call lazy isn't lazy at all? Imagine a young woman who dreams of becoming a successful entrepreneur. She has the talent, the ideas, the passion. Every day she tells herself, today is the day I finally begin. But instead of taking the first step, she spends hours planning, researching, and waiting. Not because she doesn't want success, but because she's terrified of failure. Deep down she thinks, what if I'm not good enough? What if everyone sees me fail? What if I give everything and it's still not enough? So she chooses not to begin. Because as long as the dream stays in her mind, it can never be destroyed. This is the fear nobody calls laziness. Sometimes procrastination isn't about avoiding work. It's about protecting yourself from disappointment. Psychology tells us that when failure feels like a threat to our identity, the brain often chooses safety over progress. It convinces us to wait for the perfect time, the perfect plan, the perfect version of ourselves. But that day never comes. And slowly, people mistake fear for laziness, when in reality, they're simply protecting a dream they don't want to lose. The saddest part is, the fear of failing often steals more dreams than failure ever could. Overthinking creates invisible exhaustion. Have you ever felt completely exhausted, even though you hadn't done anything all day? Imagine a young man sitting at his desk, ready to start his dream project. His laptop is open. His notebook is beside him. Everything is prepared. But instead of taking the first step, his mind begins asking endless questions. What if this isn't good enough? What if there's a better way? What if I fail? What if people judge me? An hour passes, then another. He hasn't written a single word. Yet somehow, he feels mentally drained. This is the invisible exhaustion of overthinking. Your body may be resting, but your mind is running a marathon. Psychology tells us that every decision, every imagined outcome, and every what-if consumes mental energy. The more you think, the less energy you have to act. Eventually, the brain mistakes mental fatigue for physical tiredness. So you tell yourself, I'm too tired today, when in reality, you aren't tired from working, you're tired from worrying. The tragedy of overthinking is that it makes people believe they're making progress because they're constantly thinking. But dreams aren't built by endless planning. They're built by taking imperfect action. Sometimes the most exhausting thing you can do is think about starting, instead of simply starting. The addiction to potential. Have you ever noticed how good it feels to imagine a better life? Imagine a young woman who dreams of writing a best-selling book. Every night she pictures the day people will read her words. She watches motivational videos, reads books about success, plans every chapter in her head. For a few moments, she feels like she's already moving forward. But weeks pass, then months. The book is never written. Why? Because the brain can become addicted to potential. Psychology tells us that imagining success releases dopamine, the same chemical that makes us feel excited and motivated. The problem is, your brain doesn't always know the difference between planning your dream and actually living it. So every time you imagine your future, talk about your goals, or consume endless motivation, you get a small emotional reward, just enough to feel satisfied, but not enough to make real progress. Slowly, you become addicted to the idea of who you could become, instead of doing the difficult work required to become that person. Potential feels safe. It never fails. It never gets criticized. It never hears the word no. But dreams only come alive the moment you leave the comfort of imagination and step into the uncertainty of action. Because one day, you'll realize something heartbreaking. The life you kept imagining wasn't waiting for you. It was waiting for the version of you who finally decided to begin. Why smart people sometimes look lazy. Have you ever met someone who was incredibly intelligent, full of ideas, yet never seemed to accomplish as much as everyone expected? Imagine a young man who was always the smartest student in the room. People told him, "You're going to do amazing things one day." He believed them. He had brilliant ideas, big dreams, endless possibilities, but whenever it was time to act, he hesitated. Not because he lacked talent, but because he could see every possible outcome, every risk, every mistake, every reason why his plan might fail. While others simply took the first step, he was still trying to choose the perfect one. Psychology tells us that highly intelligent people often analyze situations more deeply than others. They search for the perfect strategy, the perfect timing, and the perfect decision. But the search for perfection can quietly become a trap. The more choices the mind sees, the harder it becomes to choose just one. This is called analysis paralysis, when thinking becomes so overwhelming that it replaces action. To the outside world, it looks like laziness, but inside, the mind is working overtime. Sometimes, intelligence isn't what holds people back. It's the fear of making the wrong move. Because while average minds are comfortable taking imperfect action, brilliant minds often become prisoners of perfect thinking. And in the end, success doesn't always belong to the smartest person in the room. It often belongs to the one who was willing to begin before they had all the answers. The emotional weight nobody sees. From the outside, they look lazy. They sleep in. They procrastinate. They spend hours doing nothing. People say, they're wasting their potential. But what if they can't see the battle happening inside? Imagine a young man who once believed he could change the world. He had dreams bigger than anyone around him. But after years of setbacks, failed attempts, constant comparison, and hearing you're not living up to your potential, something inside him slowly began to break. Now every time he thinks about starting, he doesn't just see the task. He remembers every failure, every disappointment, every time he let himself down. The weight of those memories becomes so heavy that even taking one small step feels impossible. This is the emotional burden nobody sees. Psychology tells us that carrying guilt, self-doubt, and constant pressure can drain the mind just as much as physical labor drains the body. Sometimes people aren't avoiding work. They're trying to escape the painful emotions attached to it. To everyone else, it looks like laziness. But inside, they're fighting a battle between hope and fear every single day. And perhaps the saddest part is this: the person who calls themselves lazy often wants success more than anyone else. They've simply been carrying an invisible weight for so long that they've forgotten what it feels like to move without fear. Sometimes what looks like a lack of motivation is really a heart that's exhausted from trying to believe in itself again. If you've ever called yourself lazy, maybe it's time to stop. Because what if you were never lazy to begin with? What if you were simply carrying fear that nobody could see, pressure that nobody understood, and dreams that felt too important to risk losing? Remember, every successful person you've ever admired once stood exactly where you are now. The difference wasn't that they never felt afraid. The difference was that they chose to take one small step despite the fear. You don't have to change your entire life today. You don't have to have all the answers. You just have to begin. Because your future isn't built by the dreams you keep imagining. It's built by the actions you take, even when they feel small. One decision, one step, one day at a time, and before you know it, The person you once dreamed of becoming will be looking back at the person who almost gave up. If this video changed the way you think about ambition and laziness, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our next deep dive into the hidden psychology of the human mind. If you found this video meaningful, share it with someone who keeps calling themselves lazy. It might be the message they need to hear today. And before you leave, I want to ask you one question. Do you think laziness is a lack of motivation? Or is it often a hidden battle that nobody else can see? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Thanks for watching. Until next time, keep questioning the mind, because understanding yourself is the first step toward changing your life.